Look guys, I guess what I'm saying is that if I can distill my 23 years experience as a diver down into one single piece of advice that I can give to every diver out there that you absolutely must take and follow, it's this. Who is it?
It's Scott. Open the door.
Scott, what's the password?
All the beer.
Oh, okay. Ladies and gentlemen, what's going on? Welcome to Divers Ready. My name's James and we're back once again with a Meet My Dive Buddies. Thank you guys so much for supporting the series. This episode, I've got my good friend Scotty Aubinger in the studio. How you doing, Scotty?
Doing good.
We haven't said cheers yet, by the way.
Cheers.
Happy days.
Yeah.
So I brought Scotty into the studio because he has a very unique perspective on diving jobs and the diving industry with a particular focus on retail. So why don't you go ahead and sum up your sort of career experience both with retail in diving and outside of diving and all that good stuff.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, ever since I was in college, I started out in some form of retail and others. Started out in the wine and spirits industry. Eventually ended up in optical, so selling eyeglasses, contacts, all that. And eventually just found my way into the dive industry. You know, I was already an avid diver. Found a job at one of the big box retail dive shops that you know, I'm sure we'll talk about here in a minute. And yeah, so just had a blast getting into the industry, learning that different side of retail, making one of my passions part of my job. So
yeah,
awesome.
Absolutely. And the thing that I really wanted to bring you in here to talk about is that a lot of people think if you're going to work in diving, you have to be an instructor, like that's the only career path. But you're doing something completely different now as a day job, which is also diving related.
Yeah, so now I work as a diver for a company that does yacht transport. And we also do maintenance of yachts and stuff like that. So most of what I do is I'm diving underneath yachts, anything from a 40-foot sailboat to, you know, a 146-foot long super yacht that weighs, you know, 500 tons. And we're basically setting belts so that they can be lifted out of the water and placed on cargo ships and shipped around the world.
Yeah, for transporting around the world. That's awesome. That's
exactly.
Awesome. But I met you shortly after I'd moved to Miami. In fact, before I moved to Miami, I first met you when I wandered into the large South Florida-based dive retailer that you were the general manager of the Miami store. And I was trying to get a job. And I walked in, I asked for the manager, and you were unpacking Apex tech gear in the tech section. I was like, "Oh, this is good. He's got my brand. They got tech gear here." I said, "I'm gonna fit right in." So I tried to get my my CV into your sweaty palm, and you basically told me to piss off.
Oh, come on now.
That's not the logger.
I don't remember that. I thought it was a little different.
I think the exact story was that you were leaving that store to go and manage the flagship store, the larger store, so you didn't want to make any commitments because you were like handing the store over to a new general manager. So it's very much kind of like just leave your CV with me and I'll make sure it's passed on. And
But no, it was fun because I remember we were talking about like technical diving in Florida because you and your wife had just moved here. And it was a blast kind of getting to know you. And actually we found out that we actually played against each other for rugby at one point.
Yeah, absolutely. So, two different teams in two totally different states.
But didn't even know each other at the time.
No, exactly. Yeah, no, that was really cool. So my whole goal there, my whole idea was if I went to the biggest dive store in the area, and got a job there just to get my foot in the door, I'd learn all the operators, I'd learn who the players were in the industry, I'd learn the retail representatives from each of the different brands, which I did, and that's been actually pretty profitable for me on my own, setting up Miami Technical Diving, and just kind of get my foot in the door of the industry here in South Florida. And it worked out pretty nicely, I've got to say. From that we were able to spawn Miami Technical Diving, and then from that became Divers Ready and obviously the channel grew. So it all started with that little seed of you promising to pass on my CV. So thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Yeah, no, you say thank you. This is, none of this would have been happening without this guy's direct involvement.
Oh, well.
So
you would have done it eventually.
Yeah,
I'm sure, so.
And we've had a bunch of laughs here in South Florida as well, doing a bunch of different diving, just fun diving. Obviously, the retailer that Scott and I worked for owned a dive center in Key Largo, so we go down there and get to dive for free, which was fantastic. A whole bunch. We also got hooked up through the service tech Freddie and you and the North Miami Beach. We went and did like a canal cleanup.
Yeah, I was looking for evidence and murder weapons. I think we found some scooters in there. Freddie and I think, found a knife at one point. We're like, oh my gosh, I wonder if it was used like in a crime. So we're like handling it like evidence, and they're just like, no, it's just a steak knife, whatever. Like, oh, man.
We don't know anybody that was killed by steak knife.
Yeah, right?
They'd be really upset if they found the body later, wouldn't they?
That's just perfectly filleted. Perfect.
Yeah. Well, how about that?
Yeah.
Who knew? But no, let's focus on the retail expert, because your retail expertise, because you've worked in, like you said, optical, wine and beverage, and scuba diving. How does scuba diving retail differ from other industries?
Yeah, so I mean, definitely the sales cycle with diving is much different. Every industry has some sort of cycle. Like in the optical, it's the insurance industry, and like end of year, flex spending controls it. Wine and spirits, it's the holidays. And diving, obviously, you get more in the summer. So you do have somewhat of a cycle, but there's multiple cycles throughout the year, both for holiday gifts in the middle of the winter even. You get the new lines of dive gear launched by all the major manufacturers, and
normally around November, right?
Yeah, November, December, and then they're available in stores by the spring. They launch them at DEMA, as you know, so you've been there a few times.
Yeah.
And so then you see it all in the spring, so right away in the spring, everybody wants the best new dive gear. And then you even have to compete a little bit with the market where people are trying to sell their old gear, beginning of year in summer, because they're buying new stuff. So there's that added kind of almost competition, I guess you could say, for people buying used dive.
And you've worked for, we worked at the big box retailer, the Walmart of diving, right?
Yeah.
We can say that. Probably the largest in Florida, if not the country, I think. Strong e-commerce platform and that kind of, sort of major support team, head office and all this kind of stuff. You've also worked for, as have I, Ma and Pa family ran dive shops with a much smaller footprint, much smaller retail focus.
Yeah.
What would you say are some of the bigger differences, apart from obviously size and volume?
Yeah, I mean, size and volume is obviously the easy one, but like, people ask me this all the time, and I always say there's pros and cons to each. So, when you're in the big box dive retailer, if someone comes in looking for something, 90% of the time, you have it right there.
Yeah.
And that's great for, the customer. They can come in, this is what I'm looking for, here you go. Conversely, if you're in a mom and pop dive shop, they may or may not be a dealer for that particular vendor for whatever they're looking for. You might be a dealer for it and they ask for it, you don't have it, so you have to order it. So now they got to wait a week to 2 weeks for it to come in. And, with society being the way it is now, everybody's like, I want it now, I don't want to wait. I want it, same hour delivery, basically.
Yeah, I've talked about that before on the channel. It's really a struggle, because what people don't understand is everyone says, oh, support your local dive shop, support your local dive shop. But that goes against the immediacy of today's culture of everyone wants it now. Prime, 1 day, 2 day delivery on the doorstep and so on. So you walk into a mom and pa's shop and we have this nostalgic view of, let's support our local dive shop. That's great. You can't fill cylinders online, right? You can't get expert knowledge from Amazon because they're not divers. So you go into your mom and pa shop, but then they tell you, well, if you want this Amazon, if you want this particular regulator, it's going to take you 3 weeks when you can get it tomorrow on Amazon.
Yep.
So it's really hard for those mom and pa shops to compete with Amazon unless they keep inventory. And they can be faster than Amazon, because here you are, walk out the shop with it.
Exactly. And, working at the mom and pop shop, I can't even tell you the number of times when someone's come in looking for something, we didn't have it, we'll get it in a week. And, I still know people at the other place, and I hear about it, when I'm catching up with them later, like, oh, this person just came from your shop and bought this thing. And it's just like, oh man, like that could have been us, but we just didn't have it in stock. And, conversely at the big box dive retailer, there's times where like, people have come in when I was working there and would say like, oh, I'm trying to find this other shop really helped me, I know what I want. And so it's like, when you're on that end, you're like, cool, I'll sell it to you for sure.
Yeah.
But then you kind of feel bad, but not really.
Yeah.
And then the other big difference is the product knowledge of the staff on average. There's a few people in the big box retailer that really knew their stuff, but the vast majority
Literally a few.
Yeah, like probably 2 if you didn't count me.
Right. Well, the Miami store, when I was working there were 3 people who dove regularly, and only 2 of them were professionals. Myself and the service technician, who's a good friend of ours, were the only 2 that dove professionally, taught, and actually had been in diving for a while. And then one of the assistant managers used to dive on the weekends with his daughters.
Yep.
And that's it. Everyone else, they were college kids, they barely dove.
Yeah.
They were all supposed to be certified divers, and they probably had their open water, but they weren't active divers.
Yeah,
you couldn't say that, you know. So that was pretty tough. You know, a couple of guys were into free diving and spearfishing, but not scuba, which is hard when you're trying to explain the difference between a piston and a diaphragm regulator.
Exactly.
And you haven't really used one.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was definitely a challenge. I think it's easier when you've got a small family store because pretty much everyone on your staff is an instructor.
Either an instructor, dive master, or you know, fully like immersed in the culture. Because I'm not an instructor, but like I love diving. I dive every chance I get. You know, love being in the water. So, and I love gear. And since I've done some technical diving, you know, I have a collection of rigs and gear and other things. So I'm really into it and researching it.
Yeah.
But I just remember, like, you know, even with the big box retailer, like there's some people like they barely knew what they're talking about, and it turned into like, hey, here's this regulator. Would you like to buy it? This is the price. Well, what can you tell me about it?
It's a regulator. You breathe through it.
You breathe through it, and then you get to come to the surface and get back on the boat.
Hopefully not die.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's tough, you know. And yeah, I guess like for a box store like that to employ all those instructors that wouldn't be teaching courses, it's like, well, why would they, you know?
Exactly.
It makes sense. But let's go on and talk about things. I mean, really what I want to do is pick your brain about the behind the scenes knowledge that if you don't work at a retail shop can give the viewers some advantage the next time they walk into the dive store to make a purchase. And the first thing on my list to talk to you about is package deals, right? For those that you're not familiar, you'll get a manufacturer who'll say, right, well, if you buy a mask, a snorkel, a pair of fins, a regulator, BCD, and an SMB, all with our brand on it, we'll give you a ridiculous percentage off, 30, 40% off the whole kit, which is great because it might mean that you end up getting like a free BCD or, you know, 3/4 of a free regulator, depending on how much the dollar amount is. They can be really tempting, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Go for it or don't go for it.
You know, when I worked at the big box retailer, they always push it. Well, any retailer, even the mom and pop.
Absolutely.
I mean, they push it because they want that sale. They want that big dollar amount. The retailer gets a little bit of a deal on those products as well when they buy it. So when the retailer is buying products, if they're buying individual pieces, this, that, and the other, they don't get as much of a discount from, you know, the manufacturer, so wholesale price, unless they buy all these like package things themselves and then resell them as a package. But I've always not really been a fan of it because you might get, say, a package from one manufacturer. So you have your reg, octo, BCD, computer, gauge, whatever they're in there for your main scuba package. Well, yeah, that BCD you might be in between sizes. So maybe, like for me, depending on the manufacturer, like some of them are large, some of them an XL. Some I can't even wear because I can't find the right size, even with adjustability where it's comfortable. Well, if you're just going to get this package, hey, I'm just going to get this package because it's cheap. I can get started with diving. I might dive maybe once a month, or I'm going to do this to get the class and go dive it, and then I'm all done. And like I used to get in trouble for this at the big box retailer where I got overheard telling a customer once who's just about to take their open water. I'm like, well, where are you taking it? They told me the shop, and I'm like, well, don't buy all this gear yet because you don't know if you're going to want to do it. Like, you need your personal gear, mask, fin, snorkel, wetsuit if you need it, whatever. But I'm like, don't spend $1,000, $2,000 on gear where you might get it, you do it, you might hate it.
Yeah. And then,
Or this might be the wrong gear for the type of diving you end up wanting to do.
So I'm like, use the rental gear is what I always used to tell people, and I got overheard. And then, you know, we're supposed to be selling stuff constantly.
Tough.
So that was tough. But yeah, so I'm just not a fan of the packages because it's not like everything will fit, because I'm a cold water diver where I started diving, and you need an environmentally sealed regulator.
Yeah.
None of those packages have it.
Would have one in it. Yeah.
Not a single one of them. So it's like you're already subbing something out, and by the rule of law with these manufacturers, you're not allowed to do substitutions.
I've always said that, like, if the driving factor behind your dive gear is purely financial, if you're just looking for the best deal, wait and save up more money. Yeah. Like, don't make that the number one reason why you're buying a piece of gear over another piece of gear, right? Mm-hmm. If that's the right piece of gear for the type of diving you're doing, great, go for it on that instance. But there isn't really one brand that I can think of that I would dress completely head to toe and be a walking mannequin for.
Yeah, me neither.
So, but it is tough because you walk into the store and you get pushed as a customer into those kind of directions for sure. Let's talk a little bit about, because Amazon's thrown into light the fact that you can buy dive gear from pretty much anyone now, right? We were talking before we rolled camera about the difference between buying from whether you go Amazon or local dive shop or big box store, authorized reseller versus not authorized reseller. And I think maybe a lot of people don't really appreciate the difference. So I'm going to give that one to you.
Absolutely. No, and it's a huge problem in the dive industry as a whole because, whether it was at the big box dive retailer or the mom and pop shop, a lot of times you'd get somebody come in and they'd have their phone, and we always made it a point to match prices as long as it was from an authorized dealer. So what does that mean? It means someone who has a direct relationship with the manufacturer, who's buying their product directly from the manufacturer and reselling it within their business, whether it's online in store. So these unauthorized retailers, they get it through either buying it from a business that's going out of sale and they buy up their inventory and they're just trying to blow it out.
Or last year's models.
Yeah, last year's models, and they're able to get it on the secondhand market even though it's not used, and then they're trying to resell it. So the problem is these people come in and they say, hey, it's this cheap. It's like, well, it's not an authorized dealer. And they say, fine, then they go buy it. Then it malfunctions, it breaks, and then they come to your store and they're saying, hey, this is covered.
Manufacturer directly.
Yeah.
Like, hey, Scuba Pro.
It's like,
or whatever.
Yeah, so then they're like either a store manufacturer and they're like, hey, this malfunctioned, this broke, or this is defective, I need it replaced. And then they're like, well, where'd you buy it? Do you have a receipt or something or whatever, just to show it's an authorized dealer, and they don't have it. Oh, here's my receipt from Amazon from Joe Schmo in middle of nowhere, like maybe in the US, maybe outside of the US, and then they won't honor it because you didn't get it from an authorized dealer.
Yeah.
And suddenly they're all upset that now, even though they saved $30, $40, $50 on this one item, now they're out the cost of the entire item because they didn't want to spend $30, $40, $50 to buy it from an authorized dealer.
Yeah.
And it's a huge problem. I've seen it dozens and dozens of times where, people get upset with you and it's like, sorry, like this is why you pay a couple bucks more from an authorized dealer.
Yeah.
And not only that, but the manufacturers set the pricing. So there's a minimum price that they have to charge as an authorized dealer. So, whatever manufacturer will say it's a regulator, it's $500. Nobody else can sell it for less than $500. You can mark it up, especially, depending on what your business situation is, but you can't go below that $500.
Yeah.
So the minimum price is $500. So that kind of levels the playing field as well for, mom and pop shops, big box retailers.
The big box guys, yeah, exactly.
And that's the other misconception, is that this big box retailer that we keep referencing, based in South Florida, we keep referencing them, but everyone has this mentality that they're cheaper than everybody else.
Yeah.
They're not. They absolutely aren't.
Yeah.
They charge.
They can't be.
Yeah, they just can't. Is there some mom and pop shops or smaller businesses that maybe have to charge $5, $10 more? Yeah, because their overhead's much more because they can't afford to buy, $300,000 worth of gear in a month.
So they're not getting the margins and so on. Yeah.
Exactly.
The other thing that scuba manufacturers do that irks me somewhat is they incentivize stores to become a platinum dealer or to carry only their brand. And if you only sell our products and you're like, the platinum thing, and it's kind of modeled after cars, right? If you only sell Mercedes, you're a platinum Mercedes dealer. Yeah. Or if you sell a certain amount per year. I think it's bad for a number of reasons. Number one, less choice for the consumer. Number two, it's not fair to the ma and pa stores that are trying to give variety to their community, in terms of it's like, well, we'll give you better prices to our platinum dealers than we will to anyone else selling our gear. And I also feel like, I wouldn't say dangerous, but I would feel like you're funneling all people into equipment that might not be right for them.
Absolutely.
Because, as I said earlier, not every manufacturer makes stuff for everyone, right? Yeah. Whether it's a size issue or a purpose sort of issue. Yeah. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, my big thing with that was always, and I think you've spoken about it before, like with the certification agencies, just because you're 5-star has nothing to do with the quality of instruction. It has to do with how many people you get certified through you. And so the same thing with gear, like, hey, we sold this much stuff, but doesn't mean you're an expert on the gear. Doesn't mean that you're selling it to the right people as far as what works best for them. And that's why I loved, even though there's pros and cons, like I said, but like in the big box retailer, it was nice because you had so many different manufacturers to pull from. in the mom and pop shop, you might have, you know, half the number of manufacturers or 2 or 3. Some shops I've seen, you walk in and, you know, it's literally one manufacturer in the entire shop.
Yeah.
It's like, that's not a end all be all for your customer. Like, you got to carry at least a little bit of variety to make sure that you find what's good for them. So, you know, the whole platinum dealer thing, like, it's almost counterintuitive to me because, you know, yes, the higher volume stores will sell more of your product and get more of your product out there and be seen more on boats. But most of the time, not all the time, but in those smaller mom and pop shops, the people seem a little bit more passionate about the product. They seem a little bit more knowledgeable about the product. They're going to be diving more often. I mean, when I worked in the big box retailer, I mean, there was people in there that were certified that hadn't been diving in 1.5 years, 2 years.
Yeah.
And it's like, are you going to take that person's opinion over an instructor, dive master, or avid diver in a mom and pop shop that dive literally every second that they're not working?
Yeah.
And tell you why they like certain things and give you some advice?
Yeah, and as soon as a new item comes into their store, the first thing they do is take one out of the box, go take it for a test dive, sell it as open box or whatever, and yeah, this is a great regulator, or this, you know, I love this feature on it. When you're in the water, it feels like this, and so on. So definitely having that knowledge.
Yeah.
Fantastic, mate. Fantastic. Thanks so much for coming in. My only last question for you is, are you ready to face the 10 questions we ask everybody?
Ready for the 10 questions.
Let's do it.
All right.
All right, Scotty Aubinger, these are the 10 questions we ask everybody. Number 1.
Yes.
Where was your first dive?
First dive was Square Lake in Minnesota. Certification dive.
Brr.
Yeah.
Number 2, what was your best dive?
Best, as far as my favorite dive, honestly, was one of the times I went ice diving in Minnesota. Drive your truck, cut a hole in the ice, go underneath it.
Happy days.
Yeah.
Number 3, place you've dived the most.
The most is Jupiter, Florida, for sure.
Okay, number 4, who is your scuba hero, real or fictitious?
Scuba hero, it's got to be a tie between James Bond, Thunderball, or Steve Zissou in The Life Aquatic.
Happy days. Yeah. Number 5, your preferred scuba setup.
Backplate wing, long hose setup, even for recreational. So.
Hogarthian?
Oh yes.
100%?
Not 100%. I don't have the knife, and I got a couple things that I changed, but close enough.
All right.
Yeah.
6, favorite dive destination.
So far, Grand Cayman for sure.
7, freshwater or salt.
I gotta go salt just for the wildlife you see.
Absolutely. 8, your last course taken.
Last course was my cavern class.
Okay. 9, next dive trip booked.
Next one is South Africa.
Hey!
Yep.
Let's do it.
All right, sardine run.
Number 10, bucket list dive you haven't done yet.
Chuck Lagoon in Palau.
All right, mate, nailed it. Down the hatch. Too easy. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for watching. Thanks again, Scott. Appreciate you being here.
Anytime.
If you guys want to follow Scott, I will link his Instagram account, Scotty Dives, in the description of this video below. Until next time, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining me. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel if you haven't done so already. Hit that little bell icon, and if you enjoyed this video, give it the old thumbs up. Until next time, my name's James. This was your Divers Ready video for this week. Dive safe, dive often.